Welcome to the Positivity Room, where the good vibes grow.
Today we're talking with Chelsea with Solutions Pet Products. One of the things that has always stood out about Solutions to us is that they seem less interested in controlling biology and more interested in supporting it. From fermented foods to raw goat milk concoctions to whole food nutrition, they continue to challenge assumptions. As always, we're not here as experts. We're here to learn as students. So let's learn something. Welcome back to the Pure Positivity Podcast. My name is Bobby. I have my lovely wife, Eden.
Hello.
We got the Positivity Pack around here too, but the star of the show wants to say, I am Carlito! Oh, really? A little bit lower energy today. Come on, buddy. You want to say, I am Carlito? That's right. Oh, we even have little Rosa trying to talk too. Very cool stuff.
Now he's ready to keep going.
And our guest today is Chelsea. She is the owner of Heroes Pets in Colorado, and she works with Solutions as well. Can you tell our guests a little bit about yourself?
Like you said, I'm Chelsea Kent. I have owned Heroes Pets in Littleton, Colorado since 2007, so that's my retail pet supply store. I have owned Solutions Pet Products since 2021. I started that with my mom and a good friend of mine. Kind of a emergent situation. Like, I didn't really plan on doing that. 1 month prior to starting Solutions, I co-purchased Parsley Pet, which is a quantitative HTMA company. So wow. I would not have done two of those that close together. But I have known that Solutions was going to be a thing, but it was kind of a situation of necessity. So I have attended the AFCO meeting since 2017. And between advocacy and learning that, like, I knew that there were a lot of bad things in the industry, but when you go to the AFCO meetings, you learn that it's actually worse than you thought by a lot. And so that was really a hard pill for me to swallow, because I already thought it was really bad. And then I was like, okay, whatever, like, the worst thing is that you can imagine, it's 100 times worse than that. So wow. My experience as a retailer was that, like, I could talk to another good quality company and I could say, you know, I really think that if you did this, that the product would be better. If you sourced this instead of this, or if you, like, modified this, like, any number of things. And most of the time, the response was, well, we don't think that we can do that, but I guess this other company does this, and so we'll try. So they were willing to try harder as a result of another company being able to do these things. And then when these people that, like, represented this gold standard were looking at leaving the industry, it wasn't really so much just losing the brand that they had been associated with. It was more a matter of losing the gold standard and the good companies potentially lowering their standards because they didn't have that standard anymore. And as somebody that goes to the AFCO meetings and sees there's so little good stuff in this industry, and there are a lot of people that are trying, but even with that, a lot of those people, like, they want to do better, but they don't necessarily know what they're doing. So they need somebody out there where they can be like, okay, I see what they're doing, and I can at least have, like, a baseline place of saying, okay, if I learn what they're doing and I can kind of jump off from there, or I can contact them and I can learn more, or any number of those situations, then they could do better, and it would, like, maintain the integrity of the good part of the industry better. So I just felt like that was really mandatory, and I was willing to stick my head in a very expensive guillotine to make sure that that could happen. And here we are.
Wow. Wow. I mean, like,
Thank you.
just like round of applause. I mean, like, I don't even know. I wish I could give you a hug through that, but
Oh, thank
that's just,
you.
it really is amazing what you're, I know that there's that, like, that doesn't come without sacrifice is what I'm saying. So that's really incredible what you're doing. Did you think that there was like, did you see something in the pet food industry that made you realize like something fundamental was missing?
Well, I could probably go on for days about that. So, yes. Um, what I think is like the biggest thing is that the origin of the pet food industry is ultimately like a couple of companies were like, "Hey, we could actually make something that's commercially available and just put it in a can." So fine, whatever, do that. And then when there was a war, the government was like, you can't use cans, we need the metal. And so somebody realized with Chex cereal that you could not use metal and you could make breakfast cereal for dogs that's in cats that's shelf stable and goes in cardboard. So like, I mean, it's breakfast cereal. It's not great, and that's really what kibble has continued to be. But still, it was like, okay, I guess that's pseudo fine. But then over time, what's really ultimately happened is two things. So one is that the sourcing, everybody that's gotten to be a really, really big company, especially kibble and canned companies, has realized what you're making first is basically like a sludge. And you can put literally anything into that, and people can't see it. They can't tell what you're putting in there. And you're high heat processing it and doing all these horrible things to it, which actually makes it so that you can purchase chemical trash and things that are not even classified as food and put it in there. And that's acceptable. So over time, more and more companies are searching out these basically like disposal management systems and finding ways to incorporate that into their products. A lot of times you hear people like, well, my last dog was on Purina for like 15 years and they did great. It wasn't the same product that it is now. Like all of those products are kind of degrading over time. And the other thing is that regulation was really developed only for products that are available in mass. So initially, and for the longest time, like from the 50s to about the year 2000, the only products that were commercially available were high heat processed shelf stable products. Raw food didn't really come on the market until around the year 2000, and then it was really a slow progression. Regulation was built around breakfast cereal and canned food for pets. It wasn't designed to be able to support or even consider natural foods or things that people were sourcing just from their own homes and their own farms. So we're very much still missing regulation for that. And you have to know a lot about regulation to be able to compete with that. So that's something that I also feel that I and the solutions team really bring value to the industry with, is because we know enough about regulation to hold the regulators accountable when they are acting like they think they're God. And we're like, you have to comply with the law too. And we will hold them accountable to do that. And a lot of other companies we see, they just like bend over and they're like, well, the FDA said or the state said, and we'll just do that. And we're like, why would you do that? You're just making it worse. They have to comply with the law, because if you don't do that, nobody knows what the rules are, because the rules don't apply, because they're just saying, well, this is what I think that it means, or this is what somebody told me that it means, even though that's not really accurate. So those are like the foundational two things that I think were really, really important for me to maintain in the industry.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
wonderfully said. And I mean, when the lawmaker is above the law, then that kind of breaks the whole system, you know? So it's pretty incredible that you're just like in the trenches with the regulation, and you see what's happening in the raw feeding industry, from the front lines too. So you can mesh those together. It's beautiful. Um, what principle would you say has guided solutions from the beginning?
Um, I think probably the primary principle is that what we recognize seemingly more than many other companies is that really don't know stuff. Like, I'm constantly told that I'm the smartest person in the room, and I'm constantly like, I don't know anything. Like, the more I learn, the more I realize that I don't know. And there is so much information out there, and what we do know is really valuable, but there's so much that's missing. So, one of my favorite examples is scientists identified every compound that they could find in bee pollen, created a manufactured bee pollen, and then they fed it to bees and they all died. So obviously that indicates that there are so many things that we haven't identified yet. And when you take products and you isolate them into just a single component, like a synthetic mineral or say even glucosamine, there's a number of different things, and you put those together, or like you isolate silymarin out of milk thistle, and you can patent those things, which makes them more profitable. But the reality is, you have removed those components from the cofactors and co-nutrients that are designed to make it something that the body can utilize and knows what to do with, and it doesn't have reactions, it doesn't have contamination, it doesn't have the same risk potential. So as a company, as an overarching philosophy, our reality is what we're trying to create is what nature made, and we're trying to put it together in packages that make it usable to people, especially in areas where it's not super accessible to do otherwise. But we're trying to do it in a way that doesn't separate from nature in the same way that most companies do, more out of convenience or out of lack of knowledge, like especially knowledge about regulation. There's a lot of stuff that people believe that they have to do because some regulator told them that they have to, and then they never looked into it. They didn't actually define whether or not that was true. And that's another thing about regulation is like, a lot of times my experience is someone gets into a regulatory job and the person above them who seems to have authority tells them something and they're just like, well, that's true. And they never look into it. So they're just perpetuating these lies and not even knowing that they're lying about anything. And the same thing can happen with manufacturers. They're told you have to do this and they're like, okay, but they don't learn more. They don't understand the rules well enough. So that's really, really important to us is we're going to do the best, most natural things possible in alignment with the reality around those things, not just what is circulated or what we're told.
Wow. Yeah, and I love that you talked about how you're the smartest person around, they say, but you don't know anything, and that's one of my favorite traits I think that you can find in a company is when they can continue to always learn and say that we don't really actually know, because once you know, there's always another layer, right? So
Yeah. So trust
I
nature,
love that.
because in our
Yeah.
lifetimes or the next 100 lifetimes, we're not going to know what nature knows. Like, no matter how much research we do, we will not know. So trust nature and default to nature.
That. I mean, fermentation. Fermentation is nature. And this is what nature does to sugars. I mean, how has it survived for thousands of years across cultures?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's actually a lot of nuance around fermentation, like enough so that it's hard to like find a start point. But if you look at even humans throughout history, humans used to bury their meat to ferment it. There's still cultures around the world that will ferment meat for an entire year before the people are fed the meat. So even for humans, we're not really designed to eat very much fresh meat without having the breakdown from fermentation. And largely, we've kind of forgotten those practices because we're like, oh, well, now we have freezers, you know, and even at the grocery store, refrigeration and freezers. And also, the reality is, if you look at an increase in health problems, there are many things that coincides with, but one of those things is refrigeration. When we started refrigerating things, our health actually started degrading. And I do think that that's at least in part because we stopped doing fermentation and things that symbiotically support our digestion and the way that the body functions. So dogs and cats aren't really very different. Dogs are known to, or canines are known to like bury stuff, you know, in the ground for a while and then come back to it later if they have an opportunity to do that. Also, they're not necessarily going to eat fresh things. They might eat something that's been dead for a little while and their body is designed to tolerate that. So, as far as like utilizing fermentation and production, the majority of companies struggle to do that because you have to start with a really clean meat product. So it has limitations. Like you can't start with, say, feedlot cattle that has a ton of pathogenic bacteria in it and then ferment it and hope that that bacteria is going to kill that massive amount of pathogen load. You have to have it clean, add the good bacteria so the good bacteria stays higher. So, of course, that costs more money to be able to source really well. You have to ferment correctly, like the correct amount of time, the correct temperature. The way that food scientists are taught these days is largely kind of in opposition of fermentation. Like, don't let any bacteria grow, even if it's good. So we have to hurry up, we have to cool it down, and we have to get it packaged and just protect it. But even the USDA actually knows that it's not possible to eliminate pathogens. The guy that ran the USDA for 29 years, William James, he tried for his entire career to eliminate pathogens or even reduce them in meat. And he was like, can't do it. It's not a thing. The only thing we can do is teach people how to manage it. Teach people, wash your hands, wash your kitchen, you know, don't keep the products for too long, blah, 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 the things that we know in the human food world. And then the FDA doesn't know a whole lot about it. So they're just like, let's pretend everything's going to kill everybody all the time and overregulate.
Yeah.
So
that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. So pathogens really can actually function symbiotically. And there's even research right now of taking certain what might be considered pathogenic organisms like salmonella, and they are using them to cure cancer. You can purchase certain strains of E. coli and Clostridium literally as supplements. They're defined in the AFCO book. So we really shouldn't villainize pathogens, but we can use things like fermentation to compete with them and keep them in check, which you don't get with something that's just refrigerated or something that's sterilized where you killed all the bacteria via cooking or high pressure pasteurization or whatever. So we're big fans of competitive inhibition and symbiosis to make sure that that happens.
Wow. So can you explain, what is fermentation actually doing?
So there's a handful of things. On the pathogen mitigation end, one thing that it's doing is the lactobacillus bacteria that's in the solutions products, it competes with bad bacteria. So like if you intentionally contaminated our products with listeria and left it at room temperature for 12 hours or so, we have lab studies that show that that listeria will be dead in about 12 hours. Salmonella will be dead in anywhere from like 24 to 72 hours. So you get a gained benefit of having a safer product for a longer period of time, which is particularly beneficial for pets that have compromised immune systems, or people too. So like if you had a pet, say, on chemo with cancer, if you buy a sterilized product, it was only sterilized at the time that they cooked or high pressure pasteurized it. But after that, it doesn't have continued safety. With the fermentation, you continue to get protection while it's in your kitchen. Another thing is those little bacteria basically start to eat and break down and pre-digest the proteins that are in there. So it in a sense, it's like a natural, gentle form of hydrolyzation that you don't have to use a chemical process to do it. And also, again, you're getting a lot more probiotics, so you're getting more microbiome support in the gut, even aside from just the benefit of mitigating pathogens.
Wow, that's perfect. Like, wonderful explanation. And it's a perfect segue because I think there's a lot of confusion. So, can you explain why fermented foods are different than a probiotic supplement?
Yeah. So there's a book called The Food Chemical Codex, which is super boring, and I'm not really recommending that you buy it, but it exists out there. It is small, it's thin. But one of the things that's in there, it actually teaches you about expiration dates with shelf-stable probiotics. And there are very few things that have regulated expiration dates, but probiotics are one of them. And the reason is because the CFU, or colony forming units, that's listed on the label, it's like at what point is that number accurate? So they have to start with much higher CFU, and then the product doesn't have a living matrix that's keeping those alive. So they're dying. You hit expiration, and the CFU have to exceed the number on the package at expiration, and then it doesn't really go bad, but they die until basically everything's dead and you don't get that living benefit out of it anymore. With fermentation, it's actually the opposite. Because it's in a living food matrix, it's like having a whole city to make a species thrive versus just like, well, good luck with that. You don't have any access to food or anything. You're just going to die in a bottle. So with the city, everything can continue to grow and proliferate. So if you take solutions out and you put it on the counter at room temperature, rather than dying, those probiotics are actually going to increase, usually by, millions or billions over the course of up to 72 hours before they start to go back down. So you're getting the whole living matrix the way that nature intended, and you're getting it in a form where you can increase the value rather than decrease it, especially at room temperature. And you also have the opportunity with that to kind of decide how much probiotic load you want to give to your pet. So if you're like, my pet's doing really well, or say they're super sensitive, I'm going to just thaw it and give it. So the probiotic load is a little bit low. Or you can be like, I want to load you with probiotics and say put dinner out at breakfast and let it sit all day until dinner, and then it's been warmed and it's had an opportunity to proliferate. You get a greater probiotic load by dinner. So you can kind of manipulate it to meet the goals that you want for your pet.
I have no idea.
Yeah, no, that's really
It was
awesome.
just pour and go.
I think, and so many people are having gut issues these days, and I think that fermentation is one of the things that we're really just missing completely because nobody's doing it because it doesn't taste like sugar or whatever. But it's a really important piece of the gut health mystery that seems like it's everywhere. And fermentation, it might be one of the oldest human technologies that there is. So
yeah, and I think one reason that people don't use it very often is because misunderstandings about histamine. So if you ferment, especially a meat, then the histamine levels can get high, but it's more nuanced than that. It's more complicated. So people see fermentation and they're like, well, it's high histamine. I can't use that. My pet has allergies or whatever. But the reality is, one, Solutions meat is not fermented. There are other ingredients that are fermented that are put with the meat, so the meat gains the benefit of competitive inhibition without being high histamine. But two, the highest histamine products are roadkill, so not a product, but roadkill's massively high histamine, summer sausage, aged cheese. So basically, the older it gets, the more degraded it gets, the higher the histamine levels go. So when you have really fresh sourced meat that is mixed with fermented things, you have a very low histamine product. And compare that to in the kibble industry, it's almost impossible to even access refrigerated meat if you're using it in kibble. The companies won't do it. And if you go on truthaboutpetfood.com and in the search bar you type in Google Earth, you can actually see the Google Earth images of the piles of dead animals at the rendering facilities. They are all outdoors where you can see them from space. So
Wow.
obviously that's
'Cause they're
sitting out
that
there
big.
rotting. Yeah, they're that big and they're everywhere. You can find them all over. So if you
Yeah.
have, say, a low histamine meat, like let's say rabbit, but it's sitting out rotting in a parking lot waiting to be used in kibble, you now have a very high histamine product that's not officially fermented, but people are purchasing based on just some, I don't know, random idea of like what's high and low histamine without considering sourcing, production, like all of these other nuanced things. So it's just not as simple as like fermented food is high histamine. It can be if it's done inappropriately, but that's not the default.
Yeah, I mean, I do believe that any living food left out is going to start to collect histamines right
Mhm.
away. You know,
Yep.
and the only way to slow it down is with cold, you know, freezing, things like that. But that's great information for a lot of people because I didn't know what you just talked about with the fermentation and the quality of the meat actually growing probiotics in a good way as throughout the day. That's just really cool. You guys do a bunch of different products that are really, really amazing. Why goat's milk and sheep's milk?
Yeah. So, goat milk, the molecules in it are 5 times smaller than in cow milk, so it's a lot more absorbable. Cows have multiple stomachs, so they are able to tolerate that a lot better than animals that only have one stomach. So it's more anti-inflammatory, more absorbable, just easier to tolerate in general. And it's also easier to get like clean, fresh goat milk. It's so much less likely that you would ever end up with basically like a feedlot situation with a goat, right? So
That
there's
makes sense.
that with goat milk. And then sheep milk, strangely, is more similar to dog and cat milk than any other ruminant milk. So, in a sense, and this is a weird way to say it, but it's true, sheep milk is basically drier. It's lower moisture than other milks, and they produce a lot less milk than other ruminant animals. And because of that, it concentrates the protein and fat in the product, which brings it closer to a dog and cat milk. That said, different breeds of dogs actually have different ratios of protein and fat in their milk. So, like Rottweilers need much higher fat than other breeds and things like that. But still, the point is still the same that sheep milk is going to be more similar for them. The nutrient profile, sorry, the flavor profile of sheep milk is also very different. It's like richer than cow milk. It's for anybody, pet or human, that doesn't like goat milk, they will definitely like the sheep milk. So that was another reason why we wanted to come out with that. To be clear, though, we do only have one sheep milk farm currently, so it's a limited product at the moment until we get some more sheep farmers.
Oh, okay. Well,
Makes
our babies go
love
they go
it.
crazy for it. I mean,
Mhm.
they really do for all of them, but they really like the sheep's milk a lot.
Well, that's good to know because we've made our own. We had to make a supple or for baby formula really for a kitten. So and we were using raw goat milk, but
Fear
if
too.
but if we were doing sheep, that would have been more likely, more like a dog and cat, though
Yeah,
you're
no,
saying.
that
So
makes
that's
sense.
really cool to know for any future kitten or something in the future.
Definitely.
Feeding situation, yeah.
That or
That's
the
really
goat
cool.
nog. Our goat nog is goat milk with fermented duck eggs. So you bring up the protein content. So that can also be really good for puppies and kittens. And that one's a little
Yeah.
sweeter than the others.
Yeah. These guys, I think they just woke up for that because we were talking about
We
it.
know what that is.
Like
Yeah.
snacks?
Yeah.
You know what your goat time is.
Yeah. So one thing that I am really excited to talk to you about is why has Solutions worked so hard to avoid synthetic ingredients?
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot to say there. Number one, synthetics are, of course, man-made. The more you research them, the scarier they are on a lot of different levels. So one, if you look at the AFCO book, it actually has a page, depending on which version you're looking at, is somewhere in the range of page 300 if you have an AFCO book. But it's the typical heavy metal contamination levels of synthetic minerals, meaning this is what we expect pretty much in every case. So minerals and heavy metals are buddies, some more than others. Like sodium isn't really friends with anybody. It's very antisocial. Copper loves everybody. It will bind with any heavy metal whatsoever. In that sense, you're more likely to contribute heavy metal contamination, and in some cases, severely. So mercury, for example, you really don't even want 1 part per million, and the typical contamination of synthetic selenium for mercury is between 1 and 1,000 parts per million. So literally, one meal with too much selenium in it could kill your dog or cat or like permanently give them mercury toxicity. So that's one thing. Two, if you look up the safety data sheet on any of those products, like type in feed grade sodium selenite or anything that you see on a package, and scroll to the toxicity section, which is, I believe, section 9. It'll actually say no data, no data, no data, no data. So they're not researched for safety. It's very, very rare that you'll see any information. And when you do, it's usually pretty bad. So for example, sodium selenite, a form of selenium, is considered lethal at 7 mg per kg. And for comparison, arsenic is lethal at 763 mg per kg. So most companies are using this extraordinarily toxic level, and there's not regulation on most of those supplements for how much gets put in, or like there's not really much oversight on what those blends look like and what kind of testing needs to be done on them. Largely because if you look at the AFCO book, there's not maximum limitations for most of those minerals. So even it specifically says in the book, we know that this is toxic at a threshold, but we don't really know what the threshold is because it kind of depends on the composition of the food. And so we're just not going to regulate it. So in lab testing, several years back, I think it was 2019, I did lab testing with Karen Becker and Rodney Habib, and among many, many, many other things that we tested 5 popular foods for mineral levels and heavy metal levels. And iron is considered lethal in humans at 60 mg per kg. The average in kibble was about 235 mg per kg, with the highest being 1,200. And the heavy metal levels on those products were they were very high in arsenic and lead, which are expected to be high on iron. So it totally aligned with the AFCO thing. And it was highest in the product that was the highest in iron. So we can see direct correlation to that. And then another thing with Parsley Pet, with the quantitative HTMA, we've seen quite definitively that not only does supplementation with synthetics contribute to increased risk of toxicity, but it actually contributes 34% more likely chance of deficiency. Because going back to what I said earlier, if you don't have the cofactors and co-nutrients that each thing is supposed to have, the body doesn't even know what to do with it. So you can literally cause deficiency with a supplement like that because you don't know what the body is going to uptake. And say that you have a product that's really high in, let's say, mercury, mercury is going to bind to selenium. So in the body, the mercury that's excessive is going to eat up selenium stores and create deficiencies over time. And that's across the board with all of them. So adding synthetics, you just can't know what contamination you're going to have. You can't know the safety. You can't know the uptake and absorption. You can't know the effect on the pet. So overall, we're just like, it just seems so unsafe with so little clarity that it's better to avoid it altogether.
Yeah.
Well,
Wow.
we really appreciate you guys sticking to those standards. It seems to be very minimal in the industry. We look
Yeah.
high and low for dogs and especially cats. It's very confusing because dogs seem to maybe get the more fresher side of things, and then you'll and then all of a sudden the cat, section will be of the same companies though, but the cat will have synthetics added to it, and it's kind of mind-boggling, especially when they're making sure they're saying they're making sure there's better meat and all of that, but I'm like, well, what a waste. Like if all those organs and all those things are in there, that just sounds like you're wasting so much meat by adding the synthetics now when it contributes to toxicity and all these things, right? So
Yeah.
I
And there are
just
ways around that too. So that's one of those things where it comes back to usually their understanding of regulations. So for a cat food, most companies will say, well, we have to add taurine. Well, that's not really accurate. You have to have taurine, and most companies have never actually tested taurine levels. And I don't even mean that as an end product thing. Like if you go on the USDA website and you look at every individual ingredient, in the profiles that the USDA posts for, say, just beef or just chicken or just liver, like whatever, they never tested taurine. So people don't know what the values are in those, so they can't really calculate out what amount of taurine is in the end product. So they're like, well, there's no taurine, and so we need to add it. Well, if you lab tested your product, you'd have plenty of taurine in there. You don't need to add it, but you have to be the one to test it to show that it's in there, because there's not enough publicly available data to tell you how much is in there. So it goes back again to, you have to understand regulation and understand food science to be able to get around that.
So food science wise, they say taurines are in hearts. Is that correct? So if you're adding more hearts, there is a way to detect that. They just have to pay for that extra test to know they're getting the proper amount of taurine for
And it doesn't just
regulation.
have to be heart. Like any kind of meat protein is going to have taurine, and also it's going to have other amino acids that help to create taurine. So it's a conditional essential amino acid, because you can actually synthesize it in the body. So if you have meat in there in a high enough level, then you're going to have sufficient taurine. You're just going to have more taurine if you're adding heart, because it's just more concentrated in there.
Wow.
Interesting.
So you talked a few times about cofactors and bioavailability, and these are things that we really love because it's just part of what we do at Pure Positivity, and the products that we make, all real foods that synergize. And can you tell me what you think that people might be missing about, nutrient complexity and things like this?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things. One, with Parsley Pet, what I see with people that do DIY, which I'll say probably at least 95% of people are doing it wrong based on those results. I have like hundreds and hundreds of reports of DIY feeders, and most of the time I can open it and within 1 second I'm like, this is a DIY feeder, because they're just deficient across the board. I think one really big misconception about how to feed your pet best is that 80-10-10 is ideal. My understanding is that concept came from the fact that like an animal's whole entire body might be around 80% muscle meat, 10% organ, 10% bone. But the reality is that they don't eat that same way. Like they're not swallowing the thing whole, right? So they get into it, and by ratio, they eat more organ because they eat that first. and they start to fill up when they get to the muscle meat. So they actually a lower percentage of muscle meat overall. And then they're also eating the skin, which increases the fat content. So that's another problem that I see with people is a lot of times they try to avoid fat or do low fat. If you look at humans, which this also applies to other mammals, if you do low enough fat, you can actually die faster than if you don't eat at all. So rabbit starvation diets that are mostly protein with almost no fat, you can die within 3 days, where it takes like 3 weeks to die from just not eating at all. So it's literally worse than not eating. Also,
Huh.
yeah, so fats are really protective. They can help to protect the body from pathogens. They can help stabilize hormones. So if you're avoiding fat because you think your pet might have a sensitivity to it, a better consideration is where is there a deficiency that's impairing fat metabolism? So in most cases, they're deficient in vitamin D. That one is very commonly overlooked in DIY diets. Vitamin E is as well. And then they're very commonly deficient in calcium, partly because people don't supplement it at all with bones or raw milk or whatever, or sometimes they're not supplementing enough. And often they have a hormone imbalance, which depletes calcium. And if you're not testing to see what's going on with your pet, then you can't necessarily know that. So I think that a blood test and a hair test, and to be clear, not a bioresonance hair test, because in my opinion, those have no science behind them, but a quantitative hair test, doing one every year to establish trends and like see what's going on with your pet behind the scenes is really valuable because it takes the guesswork out of figuring out their diet, and especially if you're mixing it up a lot, not as much with the complete and balanced diets, unless you're adding a food that has synthetics, or maybe microplastics. But either way, like making sure that what you're doing that you believe is the right thing is working for this pet. Because something that's the right thing for one may not be the right for another because of a hormone imbalance, because of parasites, because of heavy metals. Like there are other things that influence their world besides just the things that you feed them. And sometimes you have to compensate for that. And you can't know that if you didn't test.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, you've talked enough now about the heavy metals and how prominent this is in our pets. And what role do you feel like food plays in resilience and in detoxification?
It's huge, actually. So again, in reverse of what I was saying earlier, so heavy metals and minerals love each other. So if you have normal heavy metal exposure, but you have deficiencies with minerals, then you don't have enough buddies for the heavy metals to bind to. So you can actually have higher heavy metal toxicity because of nutrient deficiencies, because the heavy metals are like, well, I don't have a friend to get me out of here, so I guess I'll just settle right here. And then it's stuck for good. So making sure that you have a balanced and appropriate nutritional profile and retention is imperative for making sure that heavy metals don't go crazy in the system with normal exposure. But then there are also things where you have increased exposure. So we've very, very, very much seen with the parsley pet test that grocery store fish, like every grocery store fish except for like small breed like salmon, sardine, not salmon, sorry, just sardine, herring, like little fish, they definitely are very contaminated with heavy metals. And so for people that are feeding a large amount of that, they're contributing even more. So you would have to increase mineral intake in a natural form that's not contaminated with heavy metals to compete with that. So nutrition plays an enormous role in making sure that the body has balance and tolerance for heavy metals.
I mean, you guys actually also carry powders like a topper type solution, which is called heavy metal, which right. And so, is that something that you would utilize, I guess, in the situation? Do they need to be more like extreme situation, or would you say just environmental? Because we get questioned all the time, on our on your packaging. So we like,
Sure, they're like,
yeah,
what would we want to use this just on?
yeah.
Why would we use it, or what
Yeah.
level, or
Because
whatever?
there's like Restore and all your other fun powders,
Hmm.
so try to help distinguish that for them.
Yeah. So with the heavy metal powder, that one is a non-synthetic mineral supplement. So we make sure that every ingredient is tested for heavy metals prior to putting it in the package, because if it likes heavy metals in the body, it likes heavy metals out of the body. And I actually was really sad to find out that a lot of the products that are marketed for heavy metal detox are not tested for heavy metals. It's like you can't
Right.
know if they're contributing them,
Awful.
which is
Yeah.
really why I wanted this product in the first place. So you can use it for heavy metal detox, and you can also use it as a mineral supplement. So especially DIY feeders, or if your pet has, say, leaky gut or some kind of malabsorption, or pets that don't have really good appetites, and so they're probably just not willing to take in enough calories to really have enough minerals, you can use it. In my opinion, there are certain things that people should just use kind of all the time if you have even a healthy pet. So the heavy metal, the parasite free, I think everybody should do a 30-day parasite detox once a year, humans included. My entire staff has used the parasite free, and every one of them were like, well, I don't think I have parasites. And then 2 days later, they're like, I definitely have parasites.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
Yeah, like a lot.
Okay.
Um, and
Wow.
then the
That's a tip.
biome.
That's a tip. It's not fear. We're not creating fear. It's like go out.
No,
Just
it's just like,
Yeah.
yeah.
it's
I
like
mean,
so many people hear things and they get scared right away. So it's like, yeah,
well, if you're eating, like, say you ate all fried food, your food is dead. Like, you're not likely to have parasites. But if you eat anything that's fresh, parasites are symbiotic with the world. We're all going to get them, and that's fine. But even in nature, wild animals actually eat certain plants with toxic compounds as anti-parasitics, or they like rub them on their bodies because they know that they function as anti-parasitic. So it's natural for every animal to be using anti-parasitics in nature pretty regularly, and we don't really think to do that. We're in these controlled environments. So it is really important to keep those things in mind, like how would this function in nature? And at least 30 days once a year, I think, is pretty imperative.
no, that's really good information. I think I might have to try that honestly.
Yeah, I
'Cause
know, right?
I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
yeah, I like sushi.
Oh
Mhm.
God.
And,
Yeah.
but seriously,
Well, I know.
try that out. You guys, go
Well, I was
ahead.
gonna say the other one is the diatomaceous earth,
Yeah.
because that's also a parasite one too, right? And I guess what would be the difference between those two?
So diatomaceous earth can be used topically to kill anything with an exoskeleton. If you feed it fresh, then internally it can get rid of some parasites. If it's soaked in something, like say you put it into, like we have it in one of our cheeses, if you like were to mix it in the milk or something, and it's in several of our other supplements where it's not intended to be anti-parasitic, it's really high in silica, which actually improves the permeability of the gut. It helps to tighten the junctions. So it can actually be used nutritionally to basically optimize the gut lining itself. So, kind of dual benefit on that one. So, as
That's cool.
just the diatomaceous earth, really that's intended to be able to just use like externally for the most part. It's safe to feed it if you wanted to, but it's mostly for external use. And here's another crazy thing. So, I actually made that product even though there's a million diatomaceous earth products out there, but there was one that I had been selling in my store, and they started diluting it with wheat. And I was
Oh
like,
my
why
God.
would you put wheat in diatomaceous earth? Like, it's not even expensive.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
wanting
I feel like wheat would be more.
I
Yeah,
know, right?
exactly. So I was like, if I want a product where I know that the only thing in there is the thing that I'm buying it for, apparently I have to package it and make it myself. And that's actually how a lot of those blends ended up being made.
Well, that's great to know too, because
yeah.
yeah, we love letting people know. In our shop, we have no fillers, and that's the thing. Wheat's a filler then.
Yeah.
Yep,
So yours
exactly.
doesn't have that, which is awesome.
So then what does Restore actually do?
So, Restore is beneficial for liver health, and then it's also really good for kind of gently boosting hormones. So, if you have, say, low thyroid, low adrenal, it can very gently boost them. So, it's not going to force activity the way that like a medication would, but it's like, yeah, you need a little bit of support. And then endocrine is kind of the opposite, where it's primarily for adrenals. If you have chronically high cortisol, there are some specific minerals that the body will dump. So you end up with deficiencies as a result of high stress, high cortisol, Cushing's, those kinds of things. So it's helping to replace a bunch of those nutrients that are lost so you don't have the symptoms that associate with it.
Good to know. Um, do you feel we talk about this quite a bit as this kind of like a reason of why we exist? We feel that there's a lot of patterns that we're seeing with humans and pets that are basically mirrored. Are you seeing some of these patterns as well?
Yeah, and they're on the big scale, like humans and pets both have increased dental disease and increased heart disease, increased cancer rates and everything. But then also with the parsley pet test, I sometimes see things that are maybe smaller things or more isolated things, but they still are very meaningful. So, for example, I have found that very consistently, anybody that lives in New York City or close around New York City, they all have high nickel levels in their tissues. So, like, nickel is part of pollution in that area. The Ohio train derailment also caused that, but like down the middle of Pennsylvania, not a problem. I tested a whole bunch of animals, like all different species, and none of them had it. Also, like I had a situation once where this lady had sent in a sample for her 2-year-old dog, and it had really high levels of some things that it just really shouldn't have. And I looked into the location where she lived, and the year prior, there had actually been a nuclear reactor leak that was kind of minimized in the news. And I was like, it seems like it would be beneficial for you to send in your own hair sample as well, because you guys might share this issue. So there are times where one hair sample will actually flag a problem that's within a household that you can capture because it's across species with different diets, or it's across multiple animals within a household. So sometimes even just acutely within one area, you can catch trends as well.
Wow. It's wild. We were talking to Dr. Katie Kingus, and she was talking about how like a dog like almost like developed an issue that their human had to like show them that they had a tumor inside of them in the same spot, you know? And it's like, it's just mind blowing what they do for us. And yeah, that's cool. And you've been doing this for a while now. So what's something that you believe today that you didn't believe 10 years ago?
Oh, 10 years. Well, let's see. So 10 years ago, I wasn't quite going to the AFCO meetings yet. So I believed that the worst thing was in the pet industry was that you could put like sneak euthanized dogs and cats into pet food. And now I don't believe that's the worst thing. There's much worse. One of the most horrifying things that I learned is that a primary source of fat in kibble and canned food is used restaurant grease, like the fryer grease. That is almost exclusively the source of meat for those big companies. So, like that one, I wouldn't say is necessarily the worst, but I was like, I can't believe this is not only a thing, but like so much of a thing that it's literally like billions of pounds a year put into not only pet food, but agricultural feed. So the animals that we're eating as well. So sometimes that's not like, even if you didn't feed kibble, say that you feed a raw food, but that raw food is sourced from, let's say, cows that are eating these ingredients. Like, you have a little bit of filtration there, but you're still supporting that industry. And those animals still are not going to be as healthy. So sourcing matters fundamentally. Like, it's not as simple as just let's feed a fresh food. It's let's feed a fresh food that's sourced well, that's formulated well, that's processed correctly, that's packaged correctly. Like, there's layers and layers of places where things can go wrong. And that's why it's really nice to be able to have more control over something where I know what's not going wrong.
Yeah. No, it is buy local. Well, we talk about fresh, local farms all the time. We just had one of ours on the podcast too. And one of the things that I was having issues with in my own diet was finding, like, I didn't even realize it until you start just digging deeper. And then you're eating like really, really high priced chicken, organic, whatever. You can find the most expensive stuff. And then you don't think about what the chicken's eating, And I found out, most of them are eating corn and soy that's GMO'd or whatever, or worse. And that was a problem with my digestive system. And I had to cut that out. Now we buy local chicken that's corn and soy free. And that's starting to catch, so, and it starts to catch by doing things like this, and sharing information. And yeah, this has been awesome.
Well, yeah. And I mean, it's such a limited thing too in the pet food world, especially. So literally in our shop, because we're so if you want to say stubborn with our ingredient list, we're very particular. Everything is synthetic free, and solutions is one of 3, I think, like total of the entire. We don't carry anything.
We don't carry very many brands.
No, because of how good your integrity is and what you're doing for your sourcing and stuff. I mean, you can tell your passion, and you're seeing all the sides, and that's really important for people to really grasp too, because you're the one doing it, you're not just making a call, and you're doing really a lot more hard work. So
Yeah.
seriously, thank you for that. You're saving so many pets.
Thank you. And actually, that brings up one other thing that is like something not even 10 years ago, I would say like 5 years ago, I believed that when a company is manufacturing a product, they really understand that product. They understand the ingredients and why they're in there. And they understand the regulation, at least to some degree. And having formulated for a number of companies from very hyper local to internationally available, I have been mind blown to find out that many companies don't really understand their products. They don't understand why specific ingredients are used. They don't understand the value of one thing to another, like how to manipulate an ingredient panel to achieve a certain goal without going to the dark side of synthetics. They don't understand the regulation. Like, there's so many things that I'm like, I don't know how you function as a company. Honestly, even having a retail store and also doing manufacturing, I really struggle to imagine how companies that don't have a retail store manage with their company, because there are so many things that I see and I catch about my own company because I'm a retailer, because I'm having the experience of managing it on the retail level or through a distributor, or seeing it through the customer's eyes. And like, just, it's a totally different way of interacting with it. So I don't know how other companies do it, but in my mind, I'm like, I don't feel like I would be good at it if I didn't have like both legs.
Yeah. You get to see
right.
all the angles. And I think that's really, I respect the hell out of that.
Thank you.
All while you have dogs and cats of your own?
Yeah, I have a Frenchie, because
Okay.
what better way to find out if your product is as good as you think it is than to feed it to a genetic misfit?
Yeah.
That's
I
hilarious.
I also have a pit bull and a tuxedo cat and a tortoise and a chinchilla.
All right.
Cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, then one final question is going to be, what's something that your animals have taught you that completely changed the way you think about health?
I think, well, the first thing that comes to mind, though I'm sure that there are many more, is largely around the way that they eat, especially with having a brachiocephalic dog. I really do think that that influences health a lot. Having a pet that's just eating out of a bowl, just a typical bowl, like there's nothing in nature that mimics a bowl. Your dog or cat really, like if they were in nature, they would be eating really slow because they would have to work the meat off of the bone. So they would be putting effort into it. They usually would be laying down to eat something, and they wouldn't only be eating the things that are in the bowl. They would be getting meals at like different times. So they would be getting a lot of dirt, which I think that we're all a little bit deficient in. That's another reason why I really like the biome supplement that we make. They would be getting like grasses and barks and like a little bit of for dogs, carbohydrates here and there throughout the day, which can really support the thyroid. For cats, they don't eat vegetables or fruits, but they eat grasses and barks for cats and some vegetables and fruits for dogs. So getting those kinds of things separately, and like the way that those impact digestion, the way that the literal way that you're feeding them and the temperature that you're feeding them can influence their health. If you play around with that at home and you try feeding them like on an enrichment mat or a mind platter instead of in a bowl, and if you feed the food at a different temperature, and if you feed snacks that are biologically appropriate at different times, you can actually see the changes in their metabolism and in even sometimes just their behavior and their ability to like stay calm and function throughout a day. So I think that that's something that everybody should mess around with a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Well, this has been a lot of
I
fun.
love that style, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, we feed our family kind of like that. So
Yes, we do. Well, what I love about conversations like this is that they remind us that health doesn't always come from adding more. Sometimes it comes from getting out of the way and supporting what the body already knows how to do. Thank you, Chelsea from Solutions Pet Food, Pet Products, Pet, so many things. You guys just do so many things for pets. It's amazing. But thanks for sharing what you've learned. And we've been having a lot of fun learning alongside you. So, yeah, thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, and thank you guys for your support. It's awesome that you're out there and that you're educating people the way that you are.
Thank you so
appreciate
much.
you.
Well, to all the folks out there, keep asking questions and stay curious and give your pet some extra love today. See you.
Welcome to